Welcome to Rated Radio Plus. I'm your host, Shane Wyndham. This is Traveling Wilburys versus Stray Cats. Let's dig in. Let's talk about Stray Cats first here. The album that came up at random was Blast Off from 1989. Out of the 10 tracks, I thought 8 were great. That means they got 7 or better on that 10 scale. This artist was submitted by an Instagram friend of mine named Ritwish, and the Traveling Wilburys, when we get there, just in case I forget, was submitted by a friend of mine named Brian. My bottom track on Blast Off was 9 Lives. My top track was Gene and Eddie. The music makes me feel like I'm having a night on the town with the characters from The Outsiders. As far as the album goes, Dick Dale meets Devo to create some easily digestible rockabilly with punk-like and comedic undertones. Or, if my references were a bit too obscure there, try imagining Misfits mixed up with Cherry Poppin' Daddies. Almost all of the music is going to feel like familiar yet swinging grooves, rehashes of older songs you'll have heard in movies and whatnot, but the recording quality is much, much higher here. There's also a ton of blistering guitar solos and just enough distortion to keep things feeling appropriately in the rock category. This is to say that plenty of the music is crunchy as fuck, and I'm here for it. The disc is doing nothing that's lyrically profound, and there's a good deal of repeated phrases which end up being more noticeable than is the norm due to the song's short run times. But there's not much to critique outside of that. This is a wildly talented group of musicians with a highly competent production team to match whatever the artist fires at that canvas of sound. The vocalist's voice is pleasant, fun, and adaptable to all manner of styles. Furthermore, the occasional backing vocal adds don't subtract from the magic. If you're not in the mood to feel like you're at the local hop with some greasers, this clearly won't scratch a major vibe itch for you. But apart from a musical shtick I'd tire of in too large of a dose, this exceeded my expectations in a big way. Undeniably vibrant and vigorous music that's expertly executed. If it had more emotional intelligence in its lyricism, I'd be calling this disc an essential listen. So yeah, it's way better than it has any business being insofar as my experiences with the genre go. I could even see Kiss and Jerry Lee Lewis fans thinking this album is solid gold. I'd routinely skip a minority of songs and wish it was more originality and less iteration, but I'll still be recommending this without fail to people who dig kick-ass musicianship. Let's take a break. The TikTok Billboard hit I listened to this time around was a song called Delulu, and the artist is Nesya, or Nesya, I'm not sure how you say it. I find this song to be simultaneously attractive and repulsive. It sounds like the chorus of some 80s club song with sped up imitation Lana Del Rey vocals, and the lyrics aren't overly repetitious or lacking in terms of style. So that's some faint praise. The primary problem with what's happening here is that it's much the same song from start to finish. Breaks in the wall of sound don't come often enough, and there's almost no variety in the melody. It's at least short enough that it doesn't get super repetitive, and I could see it being a passable listen from time to time, but in the vacuum of having to stand on its own merits, it comes up just shy of the mark. 4 out of 10 stars from me. Now, let's go talk about Traveling Wilburys. So this artist only has 2 discs, and luckily from what I understand, my random album pick wound up being Volume 1, which is obviously their debut from 1988. There were 10 tracks on this disc, and I thought 7 of them were great. My bottom track was Tweeter and the Monkey Man, and my top track was End of the Line. The music makes me feel like I'm in the back of a vintage convertible full of old friends, and we're driving with the top down. As far as the album goes, quaint and hokey sunshine, like the ghost of the 50s decided to throw a party in the late 80s. That's what you can expect of this disc. The Wilburys were a supergroup comprised of Roy Orbison, Bob Dylan, Tom Petty, Jeff Lynne of ELO, and the Beatles' George Harrison. If you can imagine a more energetic and happy version of Harry Nilsson's song Coconut, then you'll understand what the entirety of this mood-specific listen has in store for you. Surprisingly, it doesn't appear these guys had any interest in reinventing the wheel. It's just a gang of super influential songwriters having the kind of party I wish was more common in the music world. As you might expect, Dylan's contributions ground the music, while Petty and Orbison do a lot of standing out, Lynn and Harrison getting nicely lost in the breezy mix. Much of it can present as repetitious, often basic beat-keeping cheese if you're not in one of those windows-down road trip moods, but when its lights hit your emotional state just right, it's easy to see why this remains regarded as something spectacular in spite of its jam band vibes. This is also the last thing Roy Orbison gave the world before passing away, and we should all be so lucky to end on that sort of quirky high note. As you'd expect from a group of guitar players, the guitars are the most complex part of the instrumental foundation. I used to groan when my mother or uncle would turn on this group's music, having that internal reaction of, this is the most trite, white, old-timey shit imaginable. Then one day I took the Volume 1 disc for a spin of my own accord, and probably listened to it at least 3 times back to back. While I won't pretend I'm always or even usually in the mood to repeat said experience, I do think this musical curiosity is all but guaranteed to lift your spirits, and I'm finding that a harder and harder thing to take for granted these days. Maybe it's the old man in me talking, but this album will remain near and dear to my heart, therefore I've got to recommend it, no matter how corny doing so makes me seem. Please like or subscribe if you're still listening, and remember you can send all kinds of feedback to rated_radio@yahoo.com. So winter was really difficult for me here, but with my back against the wall, I'd ultimately give the win to Stray Cats for getting slightly higher marks due to more complexity in their songs' instrumentals. But you're almost certain to prefer Traveling Wilburys if you're seeking something with an emotional punch. So that's going to do it for now. Catch the main show every Friday at 9 a.m., and I'll be back with more Rated Radio Plus in 2 weeks. Plenty of time to fill your world with music.